Well, hello there, family. Welcome back to Grandma's Kitchen. Today we're making one of the most important dishes in soul food cooking, collard greens. But these aren't just any collard greens. These are Grandma's New Year's Day collard greens, cooked low and slow with smoked meat, seasoned perfectly, and served with a slice of cornbread to soak up that pot liquor. And while these greens are simmering on the stove, filling the house with that unmistakable smell of greens and smoke and home, I'm going to tell you about the New Year's Day tradition that our family never, ever skips. About the year my family was going through the hardest financial time we'd ever faced, and how Grandma's collard greens became a symbol of faith, hope, and the blessings that come when you least expect them. This isn't just about cooking vegetables. This is about tradition, about believing in better days, and about how food connects us to hope even in the darkest times. Before we start cooking, I need to tell you about the tradition of eating collard greens on New Year's Day. In soul food culture, in Southern Black culture specifically, there are certain foods you absolutely must eat on January 1st if you want prosperity and good luck in the coming year. Collard greens represent money. The leaves look like dollar bills, green and plentiful. And the more greens you eat, the more money you'll have in the new year. Black-eyed peas represent coins, pennies specifically, adding to financial prosperity. Pork, whether it's ham hocks, neck bones, or a pork chop, represents progress and moving forward, because pigs root forward with their snouts, never backward. And cornbread represents gold, golden opportunities, golden blessings. Tradition runs deep. It's not superstition exactly, though some people treat it that way. It's more like faith made edible. It's a way of starting the year by acknowledging that we need blessings, that we're hoping for better, that we're setting our intentions for abundance and prosperity. It's a way of gathering family together on the first day of the year and saying, collectively, this year is going to be better. We're going to make it through whatever comes. We're going to be all right. Grandma never missed New Year's Day greens. Never. Not once in her entire life. She'd cook a big pot of collard greens every December 31st, letting them simmer overnight so they'd be perfect by January 1st. She'd make black-eyed peas and rice, Hoppin' John we call it. She'd cook a ham or season her greens with smoked turkey. She'd make her cornbread golden and perfect. And on January 1st, no matter what else was happening, no matter who was sick or who was traveling or what the circumstances were, our family would gather around Grandma's table and eat those greens. You don't play with prosperity, Grandma would say every year as she served the greens. You don't skip traditions that call in blessings. Maybe it's just food and maybe the blessings would come anyway, but why take that chance? We eat our greens on New Year's Day. That's what we do. That's what my mama did and her mama before her, and we're going to keep doing it. I'm going to teach you how to make Grandma's collard greens today, the exact recipe she used every New Year's. And I'm going to tell you about New Year's Day 2001, the year that collard greens meant more to our family than they ever had before. Let's start with the greens themselves. I've got 2 large bunches of collard greens here, which is about 2 pounds of greens. When you're buying collard greens, you want to look for leaves that are dark green, firm, and crisp. Avoid any that are yellow, wilted, or have holes from bugs. Fresh collard greens will have a slightly sweet, earthy smell. If they smell bitter or off, they're not fresh. Now, collard greens require some serious cleaning because they grow close to the ground and can have dirt, sand, and grit hiding in the leaves. This is not a step you can skip. Nobody wants to bite into gritty greens. I'm filling my sink with cold water and I'm going to submerge these greens completely and swish them around. See how the water's already getting dirty? That's all the dirt and grit coming off. I'm going to drain this water, refill the sink, and wash them again. And probably a third time too. You wash collard greens until the water runs clear and you don't see any more dirt settling at the bottom of the sink. While the greens are soaking in that third wash, let me tell you about the year 2000 leading into 2001, because you need to understand where my family was to understand why those greens mattered so much that year. The year 2000 had been brutal for my family financially. My daddy had been laid off from his job at the plant where he'd worked for 15 years. This was before the recession, before the economy crashed, but his company was downsizing, and he was one of hundreds who lost their jobs. He'd looked for work for months, sending out resumes, going to interviews, taking whatever temp work he could find. But nothing stable came through. My mama was working, but her salary alone wasn't enough to cover all the bills. They'd burned through their savings. They'd sold my daddy's truck that he loved. They were behind on the mortgage. By December, things were desperate, really desperate. My parents were trying to hide how bad things were from us kids, but we could feel the tension in the house. We could hear the worried conversations late at night. We could see the stress on their faces. Christmas that year had been sparse, a few small gifts, nothing like previous years, and my parents had apologized for not being able to do more. On December 31st, as we approached the new year, my parents were talking seriously about maybe losing the house, about maybe having to move in with family, about my daddy maybe having to take a job in another state and us all having to uproot our lives. The future felt uncertain and scary. But on that December 31st, Grandma was at her stove, cooking collard greens like she did every year. My mama had told her maybe we should skip the big New Year's meal this year, that nobody felt much like celebrating, that money was too tight to be buying special food. And Grandma had said, "That's exactly why we're going to do it. When times are hard, that's when you hold on to your traditions even tighter. That's when you need faith the most. We're making those greens, and we're eating them on New Year's Day, and we're going to have faith that this new year is going to be better." My greens have been washed 3 times now, and the water is finally running clear. Now I need to prep them for cooking. Collard greens have a thick stem that runs down the center of each leaf, and that stem is tough and fibrous. You want to remove it. I'm taking each leaf and folding it in half along the stem, then using my knife to cut along both sides of the stem, removing it completely. Then I'm stacking several leaves together, rolling them up like a cigar, and slicing them into strips about 1 inch wide. This is called chiffonade, and it's the traditional way to cut collard greens. You should end up with long ribbons of greens. Look at this pile of cut greens. This seems like a lot now, but collard greens cook down significantly. These 2 pounds of raw greens are going to reduce to about 4 cups of cooked greens, enough to serve 6 to 8 people as a side dish. Now let's talk about what gives collard greens their flavor: the seasoning meat. Traditionally, collard greens are cooked with some kind of smoked pork, ham hocks, neck bones, salt pork, or bacon. The smoked meat adds a deep, savory, slightly smoky flavor that defines soul food greens. I'm using smoked turkey today because it's a little lighter but still gives you that smoky flavor. I've got 2 smoked turkey wings here. Some people cook their greens with just the meat and maybe an onion, keeping it simple. Grandma had her own method that added more depth. In a large pot, and I mean large, you need at least an 8-quart pot for this, I'm heating a little bit of oil over medium heat. I'm adding diced onion, about 1 medium onion. I'm going to saute this until it's soft and translucent, about 5 minutes. The onion is going to add sweetness and depth to the greens. While that's cooking, I'm mincing 4 cloves of garlic. Garlic is not traditional in everyone's collard greens recipe, but Grandma always used it, and I think it makes a difference. Once the onion is soft, I'm adding the garlic and cooking it for just a minute until it's fragrant. Now I'm adding my smoked turkey wings to the pot. I'm going to let them brown slightly in the pot with the onions and garlic, just for a few minutes. This isn't necessary, but it adds another layer of flavor. Now I'm adding liquid. Collard greens need a lot of liquid to cook properly. They need to simmer in liquid for a long time to become tender. I'm adding 6 cups of chicken broth. You can use water if you want, but broth adds more flavor. Some people use a combination of broth and water. Grandma used all broth because she said, "We're building flavor with every ingredient. Don't waste an opportunity." I'm bringing this to a boil. Once it's boiling, I'm going to add my cut collard greens. Now, you're going to think this pot isn't big enough because the greens are going to be piled high. But don't worry. As soon as they hit that hot liquid, they're going to start wilting down. I'm adding them in batches, stirring between each addition to help them wilt down and make room for more. See how they're already wilting? By the time I get all these greens into the pot, they're going to be submerged in the liquid. That's what we want. The greens need to be mostly covered by liquid so they can simmer and become tender. Now I'm seasoning. This is important. Collard greens need to be well seasoned or they'll be bland and bitter. I'm adding 1 tablespoon of sugar. Yes, sugar. The sugar balances the natural bitterness of the greens and helps develop that sweet, savory flavor profile that's characteristic of soul food greens. I'm adding 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. The acid brightens the flavor and also helps tenderize the greens. I'm adding 1 teaspoon of salt and half a teaspoon of black pepper. And then, Grandma's secret ingredient, a 1/4 teaspoon of red pepper flakes for just a tiny bit of heat in the background. I'm stirring all this together, making sure the seasonings are distributed. Now I'm gonna bring this back to a boil. Then reduce the heat to low, cover the pot, and let these greens simmer. Collard greens need to cook for at least 1.5 to 2 hours. Some people cook them longer, 3 or even 4 hours. The longer they cook, the more tender they become, and the more the flavors meld together. Grandma cooked hers for 3 hours minimum because she liked them very tender. So these are gonna simmer on low heat, and I'm gonna stir them occasionally and check the liquid level. If the liquid gets too low, I'll add more broth or water. You want the greens to stay mostly submerged while they cook. On New Year's Eve 2000, going into 2001, Grandma's greens were simmering on the stove just like this. The house smelled like greens and smoke and onions and garlic. It should have been a comforting smell, a smell that meant tradition and family and hope. But that year, it felt different. My parents were stressed and worried. The mood in the house was heavy. I was 15 years old enough to understand that things were bad, but not old enough to do anything about it. I remember sitting in Grandma's living room while those greens cooked, watching the ball drop on TV at midnight, and feeling scared about what the new year would bring. Would we lose our house? Would we have to move? Would my daddy ever find a good job again? When midnight passed and we entered January 1st, 2001, Grandma called us all to the table. She'd said it nicely despite everything. Her good dishes, cloth napkins, like this was a celebration, even though it didn't feel like one. She brought out a huge bowl of collard greens, a pot of black-eyed peas and rice, sliced ham, and fresh cornbread. She served everyone a plate, making sure everyone got plenty of greens. "Eat your greens," she said as she went around the table. "Every bite is prosperity. Every bite is hope. Every bite is faith that this year is going to be better than last year." My daddy looked at those greens on his plate, and I saw his eyes get watery. "Mama," he said, and his voice was thick. "I don't know how we're gonna make it through this year. I've tried everything. I can't find work. We're about to lose everything." Grandma sat down and looked at him across the table. "Baby," she said, "I didn't raise you to give up before the year even starts. I didn't raise you to lose faith when things get hard. You eat these greens and you have faith that God's got you, that blessings are coming, that this year holds good things you can't even see yet. You hold on to hope even when it doesn't make sense. That's what faith is." My greens have been simmering for about an hour now. Let me check them. I'm tasting a piece. It's getting tender, but still has some bite to it. The flavor is developing beautifully. The smokiness from the turkey is coming through. The greens have absorbed the garlic and onion. The seasoning is balanced. They need another hour at least. This is the thing about collard greens. They take time. You can't rush them. They need slow, patient cooking to transform from tough, bitter leaves into tender, flavorful greens. There's probably a metaphor there about life, about how good things take time, about how patience is required for transformation. Grandma would definitely say there's a metaphor there. While these continue cooking, let me tell you what happened in 2001, the year of Grandma's greens. We ate those greens on January 1st, 2001. All of us. Even though we didn't feel like celebrating, even though the future felt uncertain. We ate them because Grandma insisted, because it was tradition, because when you don't know what else to do, you do what your family has always done. On January 3rd, my daddy got a phone call. A former colleague from his old job had moved to a different company, and they were hiring. He'd thought of my daddy and recommended him for a position. My daddy went in for an interview on January 5th. They offered him the job on January 8th. The job paid more than his previous job had. Better benefits, too. We all celebrated, grateful for the blessing, grateful that my daddy was employed again. But the blessings didn't stop there. In February, my parents got a letter from the mortgage company saying they qualified for a hardship modification program that would lower their monthly payments and help them catch up on what they owed. Nobody had told them this program existed. The letter just appeared. In March, my mama got an unexpected promotion at her job with a significant raise. She hadn't applied for it. Her supervisor had recommended her. In April, my parents discovered that my daddy's new job came with a signing bonus they didn't know about. It was enough to rebuild some of their savings. Throughout that year, blessing after blessing came. Unexpected money, opportunities, help appearing when they needed it. By December 2001, my parents were in a completely different financial position than they'd been in December 2000. They'd not only survived, they'd thrived. On New Year's Eve going into 2002, as Grandma was making her collard greens again, my daddy stood in her kitchen watching her cook. "Mama," he said, "I know it seems crazy, but I really believe those greens last year brought us luck. Every blessing we got in 2001, it felt like it started with those greens on New Year's Day." Grandma smiled. "Baby, I don't know if it was the greens or if it was the faith we held on to when we ate them. I don't know if it was the tradition or if it was the act of coming together as a family and refusing to give up hope. Maybe the greens are magic, or maybe the magic is in believing that things can get better and then working toward that better future with faith. Either way, we're eating our greens on New Year's Day. That's what we do. My greens have been cooking for 2 hours now. Let me check them again. Perfect. They're tender, flavorful. The liquid has reduced into this rich, concentrated pot liquor that's full of flavor. The smoked turkey has flavored everything beautifully. These greens are ready. Now, traditionally, you serve collard greens with some of that pot liquor, that cooking liquid that's now infused with all the flavors. Some people like a lot of pot liquor, some like just a little. And you always serve collard greens with cornbread, because the cornbread is for soaking up that pot liquor. Let me serve some of these greens into a bowl so you can see them. Look how tender they are, how they're this deep green color. The smell is incredible, smoky, savory, with that hint of vinegar and sweetness. This is what New Year's Day smells like in a soul food household. I'm going to taste these greens. The flavor is deep and complex. The smokiness from the turkey, the savory richness from the long cooking, the sweetness from the sugar, the brightness from the vinegar, all balanced perfectly. The greens themselves are tender but not mushy, still have a little bit of texture. This is exactly right. This is how Grandma's greens taste. What I learned from that year, from watching my family go through hardship and then experiencing those blessings, from seeing how much hope and faith Grandma put into a pot of greens, is that traditions matter, especially when times are hard, especially when you don't know how things are going to work out. That's when you hold on to the things that connect you to your family, to your history, to your faith. Were my family's blessings in 2001 because they ate collard greens on New Year's Day? I don't know. Maybe yes, maybe no. But I do know that starting that year with tradition, with family gathered around a table, with Grandma insisting on hope and faith, even when circumstances looked hopeless, that mattered. That set a tone. That reminded everyone that we've survived hard times before, and we'll survive them again. Food is never just food in our culture. Collard greens aren't just vegetables, they're history, they're tradition, they're faith made edible. They're a way of saying, we believe in prosperity, we believe in abundance, we believe that this year will bring good things. And sometimes, the act of believing, the act of holding on to hope and tradition, that creates the space for blessings to arrive. Every year since then, our family has eaten collard greens on New Year's Day. We never skip it. We gather at Grandma's table, or now that Grandma's passed, we gather at my mama's table or my aunt's table, and we eat those greens. We remember the year when everything looked hopeless but turned around. We remember that blessings come when you least expect them. We remember to have faith even in dark times. Thank you for being here with me in Grandma's kitchen today. Thank you for letting me teach you how to make collard greens, and for letting me share the story of the new year that changed everything for my family. I hope you'll make these greens. I hope you'll start your own New Year's Day tradition if you don't have one already. And I hope you'll remember what Grandma taught us, that hope and faith matter, that traditions connect us to something bigger than ourselves, and that sometimes a pot of collard greens represents more than just food. Next time in Grandma's kitchen, we'll make another soul food classic, and I'll share another story about the lessons learned around the table. Until then, take care, make some collard greens, hold on to your traditions, have faith even when circumstances look dark, and remember, every bite is prosperity, every bite is hope, every bite is believing in a better tomorrow. God bless you, family. Happy New Year, whenever you're watching this. May your year be filled with blessings, and may your table always have collard greens on January 1st. I'll see you next time.